Hi, and welcome to wholesoulschool and Foundation's Fireside Chats with Lacy, Frazer, and Marie Mohler. Hi, Lacy.
Hi, Marie.
The month of February has been all about the ego and its clever defenses. We began with a blog article that introduced this topic, and then on the 15th of the month, we released our first Fireside Chat, where we discussed several specific psychological defenses that one might engage in to protect themselves from experiencing uncomfortable or unwanted emotions. We discussed intellectualization, rationalization, denial, judgment, victim stancing, and projection, among some others. So for those of you joining us today, you may want to refer to that earlier podcast where we described that in a little greater detail. Today we're discussing a film that we invite our listeners to watch called The Ultimate Gift. We will continue to recommend and review a film each month that we believe illustrates at some level the themes and concepts that we're going to be focused on throughout each month. I personally love using film and the characters in film to teach and illustrate these aspects that are prevalent in the human condition. Movies really help to reflect these characteristics in action, portrayed by skilled actors to all of us so that we can learn from them. So The Ultimate Gift is the film we're going to spotlight in February to be our illustrator of the clever ego's defenses. This story is about a young man who comes from a wealthy family and who stands to inherit millions of dollars from his late grandfather. Keep in mind that there are other potential heirs to this great fortune that also play their part to illustrate all kinds of human conditions, beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. Now, before his grandfather passed, he devised a series of tests or lessons for his grandson Jason to learn from. And if he passes them and truly learns the deeper lessons, the potential is there for him to inherit the bulk of his estate. So while at first Jason appears to be just like the rest of his family members, egocentric, greedy, callous, and disconnected from his self, others, and a higher power, as he progresses through the tasks given to him by his deceased grandfather, he begins to learn about compassion, forgiveness, connection, and love. And so within every task, as Jason steps up and moves through each challenge, he is being gifted more authentic parts of himself and an inner valuing of what is good in his life.
Awesome. Thank you for that summary, Marie. What we really want to focus on today with respect to this film is the ego and the defenses of the ego. And Jason is a really, really good example and illustration of these concepts that we've been talking about this entire month. So I want to reiterate that Jason was born, Jason, just like all of us, was born with innate gifts, a connection to himself and a higher power, pure positive energy. But he's born into a family with a great deal of dysfunction.
And conditions.
And a lot of conditions.
Right, yes.
And to top that off, basically, he also suffers from the loss of his father at a very early age. And as a result of that, has deep emotional pain that he really struggles with what to do with. He does not know how to cope with that emotional pain. He's born into a family that is not open to expressing emotion. And if they do express emotion, it's usually anger. And so Jason grows up to be a man who employs a lot of defenses to keep himself protected from the threat of others, from getting close to others.
And from the pain that he doesn't want to really move through and deal with related to the death of his father.
Exactly.
Right. So he constructs this armor, basically, right, Lacy?
Right.
To keep those unwanted feelings at bay.
And that is really the function of the ego in a lot of ways. And for a lot of us is it keeps unwanted feelings, uncomfortable emotions, things that have us scared or anxious. It tries to keep keep them at bay. And so we're not able to really process and move through them and find our authentic self. And that's the journey that Jason goes on in this film.
Exactly. So the movie opens up at the funeral of Red Stevens. He's a father and grandfather of 5 children, and I'm not quite sure how many grandchildren, but
Many.
And so there are all these people gathered. It's raining. No one really feels any sense of loss. There's chatter. They just want to get the funeral over with and find out what they received in the will, basically. And so while the funeral's ongoing, Jason drives up late to the funeral, makes quite a loud entrance with his car. He's got his music blaring. He shows up with a number of friends. He's got his sunglasses on, like he's too cool to even show up on time, right? And what does he bring with him, Lacy, basically, right?
Well, I think it's a wonderful depiction of his arrogance, which is, I would definitely say, one of his prominent defenses. He wears his arrogance like a cloak or like a suit of armor. It's part of his armor. He makes sure that he's recognized, that people pay attention to him, and that he comes in very high and mighty. He is living life on his terms. He goes to where he needs to be on his time frame. He shows up in his own way, and he brings a deep sense of, I'm better than everybody else, I'm superior than everybody else, kind of wherever he goes. And that was very evident in the very opening scene of the movie.
Yes, and to me, he even shows up with that attitude, his anger, whatever he's carrying that around and whatever purpose it serves. He shows up late as if to devalue the person's life who just passed. Right?
Right.
That's significant too, I think, in the film. So there's a lot of energy around that. So when he shows up, he brings with him all of his conditioned behaviors and his ego defenses. And in his world, who wouldn't? Because he's also going to be surrounded by all of these family members that he hasn't felt safe to be around for most of his life.
Right.
So
his defenses are probably in high gear at this point, especially at the funeral.
Right.
And I think it's important to just, again, remind listeners who've been sort of following this topic this month that our ego is all about the preservation of the self. And Jason, the trauma of losing his father at a young age and then burying the emotions around that very deep, like we talked last time about, the duvet cover, stuffing the emotions like a pillow in a duvet cover. He really stuffed those emotions because it wasn't safe for him to express himself. It wasn't safe for him to express grief around his father's death. It wasn't safe for him to express the confusion he had around his father's death. And so all of that got very buried, and in burying that, he became very disconnected from his own emotional experiences, from other people, and certainly from any kind of higher power. And that's really, in order to keep those emotions at bay, that's when we construct defenses to make sure that we don't have to face these emotions that are so deeply buried, because it's too threatening and it's too scary and it's too unsafe to do so. So we see very early on as an adult that Jason is arrogant. He lives a pretty hedonistic lifestyle. He is a pleasure seeker. He is gonna date who he wants. He's going to accumulate all kinds of material possessions. A lot of this is from the conditioning and modeling from his family, but it's also part of that arrogant part of his armor that he wears. And by strutting around and living life on his terms, he feels in control of his life, and he feels that he can keep everything else and everyone else at bay. And that's really the point of that. And you mentioned his anger, and pretty quickly it's obvious that Jason carries a big chip on his shoulder, and we can definitely say that he carries a lot of anger around his father's death and just in life in general. And in fact, if I may say, anger is an emotion that is is having worked with men for so long, anger is probably the number one emotion that is acceptable to express. If you're angry, you're not vulnerable, you're not weak, you're not sad, you're strong. There's something about the quality of anger that is acceptable for men to express. So every emotion kind of funnels through into anger, and Jason uses anger quite well to keep people at bay. He projects it outward like a weapon, and he keeps people at bay with his anger.
Exactly. Well, and I was going to say, so, from the funeral, they transition, I think, to the law office of the executor of his grandfather's will, who is clearly a good friend of Red Stevens. They were lifelong friends, and it's his task now to disperse the assets, basically, of Red Stevens' estate. So this family transitions from being out in the rain at a funeral, not wanting to be there, all very disconnected, very self-absorbed and selfish, and thinking, what's in it for me? What did Red leave me, right? And they all go to the law office of, is it Hamilton? Mm-hmm. I believe Hamilton is the character's name, who's the executor and good friend of Red Stevens, who's now to implement this will. And they're all sitting around the table in their little posses, mm-hmm. in their little clusters of family members around a table, all waiting to see what their group got. And Jason's not even there at that point. He's even late to that. So all of these are statements that are letting you know these character traits and these ego defense mechanisms, that he's devaluing this, his presence, he can show up when he wants. And so each family member, go ahead, Lacy.
No, I was just going to say, just that he's pretty walled off and doesn't care. Or at least he wants.
He gives the air that he
gives the impression
care.
that he really doesn't care.
Yes. And so, you definitely see the executor of the will go around the table, let people know what they've received, which is not at all what they expected or wanted. And they all have a lot of feelings about that. And you see them express their conditioned behavior and their arrogance and their attitudes. And they huff off and they're dismissed basically from the room, because I'm sure there's an awareness on the executor's part that it's not going to be a productive conversation to discuss why these people didn't get the inheritance that they thought they deserved. So as each of those family teams leaves the room, Jason and his mother are the last two there. His mother receives her inheritance and she leaves, and Jason is called into the room by himself. So he's kind of the last family member, and he assumes that he's basically not getting anything, or he still has that big chip on his shoulder. And they close the door and a new conversation begins with just him.
Exactly.
Right.
And what really ultimately happens is the grandfather had, I believe, seen in Jason the potential for a journey. He saw the potential to connect to some kind of authentic self. He believed Jason was not the person that he portrayed himself to be. I believe the grandfather saw in Jason the ability to shed his armor and connect again to his heart and to some sense of authenticity. And so the grandfather, in a brilliant move prior to his death, constructs a series of tasks designed to give Jason a gift. And with each task, Jason receives a gift. He does not see it as a gift at first, but in the end it comes around. He incorporates it, he internalizes the gift. And
so the first several tasks are designed. Each task, of course, he doesn't get the gift until he actually completes the task successfully, right? But the first 1, 2, or 3 tasks that he has to face, he still has a massive chip on his shoulder while he's doing it. And he's doing it just to get what he thinks he wants, not for any real reasons inside that are kind of motivated from his heart, but more just like, I'll do whatever this is to get this done so that he can get what he believes he's due. Right, Lacy?
Yeah, and you really see, you said it so well, but you see that as he's stepping into completing these tasks, the initial motivation is selfish, greedy. It's to get it done. It's to get what is rightfully his. There's a sense of righteousness there.
Yes.
But as he moves through the tasks, he gradually, you can see gradually some of the hardened shell start to fall away, and he starts to experience some authentic connection with others, some authentic connections with himself.
And so, this is a great film to watch and experience because they do it so beautifully. And I don't know that we've conveyed, but the grandfather is giving these tasks through videotape. So he basically taped conversations speaking directly to Jason before each task is given. And he doesn't lay out all the tasks that Jason's going to have to face. He just gives the next one. So I think one of the more profound things in the story that I want to say at this point is just that Jason has to step up, even though he wouldn't call it this and I wouldn't call it this at the beginning of the movie. But there's a certain level of faith that I'm going to step into this task, not knowing the outcome, but just knowing it's being required of me. And I'm going to step into it believing that some beneficial outcome is going to come my way. And initially, we're speaking about Jason's motivated by selfishness and by collecting what's his. But as he successfully completes several of the earlier tasks, something inside him starts to shift where he's being motivated by something different, something more authentic. So I wanted to have you, Lacy, just talk a little bit and reflect a little bit on just some of the ego's defenses that Jason portrays, what he expresses, and how he demonstrates his armor in the film.
Well, we've already discussed a little bit about arrogance and anger and where those defenses are sort of born out of.
Can I just say, and his armor wields those two things through projection, because he's not just embodying anger and being arrogance. He actually pushes that out and projects that onto other people. So projection is even the bigger defense on top of those two.
Yes, right? Absolutely. That's what I was going to go into next is, if you think about if I had a jewel and I wanted to protect that jewel from a thief, I'm going to devise a defense system so nobody can break through to steal that jewel. And we as human beings are much the same way. We carry these sort of traumatic experiences, deep emotional experiences, and rather than being taught or modeled how to process them and transcend them, we protect them at all cost, and we develop a set of arsenal to protect that nugget of emotional experience from being taken or processed or stolen. So in Jason's case, we've talked about his arrogance, we've talked about his anger, and a lot of this is projected outward in order to keep others from, really to keep himself from having to face that emotional pain, and also to keep others at bay. There are several other defenses that we can see through Jason. One is judgment, and how Jason uses judgment to make himself feel better about himself and to keep others at bay. And there's a great scene in the movie over Thanksgiving dinner where you really get a flavor for this family that he grew up in, and he was conditioned to judge anyone and everything. He was conditioned to believe that his family and himself were better than anybody else, and that judgment serves as a defense. It keeps him separate from others, and from really admitting to himself the things that he needed to know about himself.
And I was just going to say what a contrast that Thanksgiving dinner is it models at least the contrast of here they are as this one big family that's supposed to be sitting together and conversating and connecting and communing in a way on this day of gratitude and giving thanks. And all they start doing around the table is bickering and judging and mocking and shaming each other and ridiculing each other in kind of a sassy way. And all that you can see flying around that table is cutting remarks, right? And it ultimately makes Jason want to leave, just cut out and leave the experience, because he's aware that, this family, there's something that doesn't feel good. He knows that, and it reflects that too. And in previous times in his life, it just serves to reinforce why he needs his armor. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Right? You can't go to a Thanksgiving dinner like that and survive if you don't have your armor, right?
Well, and that's it's an amazing scene because that's really a turning point, I think, in Jason's journey where he really is starting to realize where he has come from, how he has been conditioned, and he's starting to pivot to say, wow, I really don't want to be like this anymore. And the girlfriend who he's connected to and takes to the Thanksgiving dinner, she is sort of the metaphoric representation of a different way of life. She's very connected. She's more heart-centered. She's dealing with her own trauma and tragedy in her life.
But with a great deal of love and not armor.
Exactly.
So she's feeling her pain in her life as it's happening. And even though she's experiencing some trauma, she's still able to engage with other people in a very loving way. And so, again, a contrast. So his girlfriend that he takes to the Thanksgiving dinner is modeling this type of love and connection despite her experience of trauma going on. And yet around this table are years worth of family conditioning and traumas and pain that's unexpressed, and that everybody, if you go back to that analogy, Lacy, that you used of the gem that we're all protecting, each one of them at the table has some nugget of pain that they're protecting. They don't necessarily have awareness of that, but boy, they're going to defend it to the death. And they do. And they use words to cut like a knife into other people around that table. And somehow that serves to protect their own pain. Because if they're attacking out, they're not vulnerable to somebody else's attacks, right?
Exactly.
And so it's a pretty powerful scene in the film. There's a lot of these segments of the film really illustrate well why we need our armor. This was a more extreme version. Not everybody has a Thanksgiving dinner exactly like that, but I think we've all been in places.
Although I actually think many of us have had those Thanksgiving dinners.
Right. Or certainly other events in our life where we're around a table with people that we're finding difficult to be with. And so I think we can all relate to some version of that in our life.
Well, and I think what was so powerful, too, about that is that you could really almost see his character waking up to the truth of not just who these people are, but who he has been. And yes, when you watch him wake up to the truth to who he has been, in contrast to who his girlfriend is and how she deals with her life, it really is a pivotal point in the film where he starts to, in his journey, where he starts to, you can tell he's at a place he's got to make a choice.
Well, and right after that dinner experience, they leave, and the girlfriend is trying to show him love and to talk to him about that he has a great deal of choice, that he doesn't have to be like them. He can be another way. And at this point, that I agree, Lacy, is a turning point inside Jason in that transformational process. He's not ready to embrace the new that he can become, and he's actually overwhelmed with, he knows he doesn't want to be that family anymore, but he doesn't see a way out. He doesn't see a way that he can be anything different. So again, right after that experience, he pushes her away because he just doesn't know how to deal with what would my life be like in our conversation, what would my life be like without that armor? I don't want to be that armor anymore, but I don't know how to be if I don't have my armor, right? So again, to cope, he pushes her away, he disconnects, and he has to journey a little more and through another task or two before he ultimately begins to start to actually connect with something real inside himself, something real and authentic inside his heart.
Yes, exactly. And I think that the relationship between he and this woman also has a young child who he connects with and makes a real authentic connection with, and he was not expecting that. And so we can see that as he progresses through the tasks and as he progresses on this journey, that this chasm that used to exist between sort of his head and his heart, if you will, is slowly starting to close over time as the armor is starting to melt, as he's starting to feel that he doesn't need his armor as much. Right. And as that melts away, this chasm grows a lot smaller between his head and his heart.
And just because this movie is the ultimate gift, what's actually happening in the tasks, right? They're designed to bring about these gifts, right? To call them out in Jason so that they initially appear as challenges, but they're actually what's melting that armor.
Exactly.
Right. So did you have more ego defenses to talk about?
I think that
at least to highlight?
We've actually covered a lot. I mean, the arrogance and the anger is very obvious. The projection of the anger and the arrogance is very obvious. I think one of the things we haven't mentioned is walled off emotions. We see that Jason has a lot of superficial relationships early on in the movie, that he's just not one to feel connected. He's a pleasure seeker and he's selfish, as we've said before. And you can feel that he's pretty walled off from experiencing any other emotion except for anger.
It's almost like the only true relationship he has in that early part of the film and in his life is his relationship with anger and his relationship with shame and judgment. That's what he's in relationship with.
You are so right.
Not the people actually in his life. And most of those people have had the similar kind of conditioning where they're willing to join him in the relationship with those ego defenses more than they're in relationship with him. It's really powerful.
Wow. I would say he's consumed by it.
He is.
Actually, now that we're really talking about it, I think he's sort of consumed by this anger and this unexpressed and undealable emotional trauma around his father. And, at some point he has to face the truth about the death of his father, which we won't go into details about and spoil that, but he does have to face this truth. And it's in facing the truth about his father that he starts to...
He extracts the gift.
Yes.
Of what the journey of going into that emotional pain and the ego defense of blaming the grandfather for his father's death. When he takes that journey and he goes deep inside what that pain has been and all of the armor he's put up around that and all of the pain that the armor has caused, because the armor causes pain. Right? It reinforces the pain in that original gem or jewel that he's ultimately trying to protect. When he takes that journey to go deep inside the pain, it melts.
Yeah.
It releases. There's an awareness, a new awareness starts to fill him, and he's given the gift of himself, his true self, and what his feelings really are, which is the love for his father and the fact that he misses his father and the tragedy of growing up without a father. But it really highlights the love he originally had, which was buried under all of that pain and all of that armor. And that's another significant turning point in this film, illustrating what happens when we find a way to become courageous enough to go into the pain we've been avoiding for a very long time. Inside that courage and inside taking those steps is a gift for all of us. And this film does such a brilliant job of showing the challenge we face, the things we don't want to look at. In this case, Jason decides it's worth it because he thinks there's going to be this great fortune. And in the end, there is a great fortune in terms of, many billions of dollars. But there's an even greater fortune of his own authenticity and coming back to a sense of love and purpose and contribution and service in his life.
Yeah, and wholeness.
And wholeness, right? And wholeness. And you see, that chip that he'd been wearing so early on, just like the armor we wear, is so heavy. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to be projecting all of that energy out into the world to say, I'm powerful. Can't you see me? Right. And I have many weapons at my arsenal that I can use. So don't mess with me. That's a lot of heavy artillery that he was carrying around. And as he goes through each task, and he falters and he fumbles and he struggles, and he resists it at some points. But as he does keep going and he keeps moving through that transformation process and he steps into the deeper and deeper tasks, he's actually becoming so much lighter. If we saw Jason as a knight, literally in armor, he shows up as this very heavy attitude, bearing, anger projecting, selfish, lost, and disconnected person. And as he really starts to take off layer by layer by layer of his armor through these tasks, you see that underneath all that, he was always light. He was always much lighter and brighter than the armor would have ever revealed to anyone, let alone himself. And you see him start to become more comfortable in this new version of himself, which is really who he always really was. And so it's so beautiful to see him be so heavy at the beginning of the film and so light and loving towards the end.
And connected.
And driven by ideals or desires inside him that he didn't know he had, right? And I would say, to reflect to our listeners, how many of us are like this, right? We all have layers of heavy armor because it's just the conditioning of our culture here on earth. It's hard to be here and not have picked up some armor, or it would have been hard to make it through grade school. It would have been hard to make it through, high school and college, or, our lives here and function. Because this world can be a cruel world, and there's a lot of people projecting, and there's a lot of people who are angry. And so most of us have some version of armor that we wear to make it through those experiences and to just get by in our day-to-day lives. And just getting by is not really who we're designed to be. We're not just here to survive. We are here to thrive. And our armor keeps us in a consciousness and in a place inside ourselves where we're focused on surviving. And the true task and the courage required is to become willing to see, is the armor that I'm wearing worth it? Is the armor that I'm wearing really helping me to live my best life? Or am I just really coping in my life day to day, whether it's in our family, with our kids, in our jobs, with our extended families? Is it really serving us, or is it serving only to keep us small and heavy and overwhelmed and stressed out? And it is a very courageous decision to say, I might just peel back. Maybe I'd be willing to peel back 1 or 2 layers of my armor. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and inner motivation to say, I think I want to do a little more than just survive. I think I want to have more positive experiences in my life, whatever that is for you in your own life. But even if I just wanted to have a real relationship with my son, or I want to have a real relationship with my girlfriend, or I want to have a real relationship with nature, right? There's many kinds of authentic relationships that we can desire.
I think one of the things that you're talking about that really strikes me is this choice that we have. This is why we started Whole Soul School and Foundation, is because we believe that you can step on a path of self-awareness and self-discovery without needing to have tragedy or trauma to ignite that in you, And I really like how you just said all of that, because yes, Jason in a way was forced in the beginning to kind of face some things in himself through the task because he wanted the money and that was his motivator. But what we're trying to say, and I think what you've just said so well, is that we have choice. We have choice to wake up to who we really are. We have choice to let go of this armor and connect with our true light, our true purpose, and our true meaning. We have choice, and part of what we want to provide here at Whole Soul School and Foundation is sort of a touchstone for people to learn, to grow, to inquire, to have curiosity. We want people to be curious about their journey and their path to their purpose, their journey to meaning. So I wanted to highlight that.
That's so beautiful. And I think I agree with what you were saying about Whole Soul School and Foundation and our intentions for creating it. And, in many ways, we offer it as an invitation to people to consider that they have the power of choice in their lives to make a choice. And I think the girlfriend at that Thanksgiving dinner was in some ways the voice of that, the voice of choice, right? She was the voice of choice.
Yes.
She witnessed that whole family dynamic.
Right.
And she looked at him, and the two of them knew that something in them was not exactly like everybody else around the table. And when they left that Thanksgiving dinner, even though there was a whole lot of emotions they were feeling, right, after that experience, she really turns to him and says, "But you don't have to be that. You may come from that, but you don't have to be that. It is a choice." And so isn't it interesting, and I don't think we talked about this, that the girlfriend is not wealthy. This girlfriend at this point does not have a lot of money and in fact struggles to pay her bills, but yet she has this richness of knowledge that she knows about what's most important, and the connection with her daughter's most important. Her connection with Jason is most important, and who she is and how she shows up in her life is most important. And that's a wealth that many of us don't really consider because we're so busy and distracted by our outer lives and the stress of just being on this planet. It's hard sometimes to make the time to reflect that I do have choice. I do have choice in every aspect of my life. What I spend my time doing, who I spend my time with, what I spend my time focusing on, what I spend my time thinking, where I spend time in my inner world, what I feel. So there's choice on every level, but sometimes we just have to be invited to choice. And in this way, I think they don't speak about it this way in the film, Lacy, but the grandfather is offering Jason a choice. You can be like everybody else in this family that he wasn't able to affect change in during his life, but in death, he was able to offer the choice to Jason in this way. And I think what you were saying, Lacy, is that we don't have to have a trauma or this massive challenge. Sometimes that's what comes. And sometimes you see people make big changes when they have a big struggle in their life because they face life on different terms in those situations. But if you're somebody who would say, well, I don't have anything really going on in my life and I don't have any grandfather going to will me $2 billion. I don't have that going on, or I don't have a health crisis right now, or my life seems pretty good. Our invitation is for you to become willing to, at the very least, look at your life and look at your interactions and look at your relationship with yourself and look at your relationship with your own armor. And, we invite you to look at, just do kind of a review in your own life of how is any of what we're talking about here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, in our Fireside Chats and in our other podcasts, how might some of those defenses still be active in your life? And are you living your life to the fullest and with the richness that you can be living? Or are you still living in some way smaller or in this heavier world, still employing a great deal of armor? In my view, a lot of us are wearing this armor pretty unconsciously, because the culture simply reinforces it without us even having to think about it. So it's the rare spiritual warrior who decides, if they don't have a catalyzing experience that calls into question in some kind of life review, that would actually take this look at who they are, how they're living, how they're feeling, and what they really want for their life, and how they're stepping up into their true passion and purpose in their life. And so I love how you see, again, Jason go from this heavier, smaller, pretty rigid, conditioned self to this much freer, more connected, loving self. And I think choice is one of those inner doorways that opens inside him at the grandfather's invitation to accept the challenges that he's given.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, very well said. There's just, I wanted to, before we close out, I have this scene in the movie that keeps playing itself in my head that also sort of represents a moment when Jason decides to face his own emotional pain. And it's a scene that's very quick, and some might miss it, actually. But it's when he travels to his, I don't know if it's his or his father's storage facility, and he goes in and he finds all of these letters that his father and his grandfather had written him over the years that he never saw, that were kept from him. And it's implied that he learns, he deeply, by going into that storage unit, that was one step towards facing his own emotional pain.
Then his past. His past is in that storage unit. And we have storage units inside us, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so he makes the choice to go and face that. And then when he's inside, he finds these letters that are addressed to him that were never given to him and were never opened. And he has to make the second choice, which is, do I open these and actually face and feel the pain that I'm likely going to feel when I read these letters?
And am I going to have the authentic conversations through these letters now that my grandfather's passed? But am I going to engage those conversations now to know the truth of what I wasn't capable of seeing before because I just wasn't ready?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
It's powerful.
It's very powerful. So he does, and he faces, that's another pivoting moment where he makes those choices to face those emotions. And what's so important for our listeners is just that it's in facing the emotions, allowing yourself to experience them, that they dissipate, they fall away. And what happens?
And they leave you with a gift, usually. They leave you with some gift of insight that you didn't have before, that's much more true and authentic than the wound that was so heavy that you were carrying around, that wasn't completely the authentic and true story of who you really are. Right? It was just some weight and some pain that you were carrying around until you had the skills to look at it again and clear it away.
Exactly. And so as you gain the gift, you then the armor falls away. So
exactly.
It's beautiful.
Lacy, I just wanted to make two more important points, and then I think we'll close for today. But I wanted to bring up this awareness in the conversation that in all of the shifts that Jason is making through this film and all the tasks that he's facing, as he successfully gleans the gifts and he takes them inside himself and he's starting to transform, do his family members change?
No.
No one changes.
No.
They're still exactly who they were.
Right.
right? They're not doing anything to make it easier for Jason to change. In fact, they step up in some ways to activate all those conditioned patterns and beliefs of anger and frustration and shaming and judgment to test Jason's willingness to experience that, but without his own arsenal, with new skills. And so his family does not change. And so a lot of people think, maybe thinking, well, I'll change when my family members change. That actually isn't a very effective strategy, because if we wait for our family members to be changing, we might be waiting a very, very long time. Our point of power is to realize that only we have the power to change ourselves. And that a lot of times, and most of the time, I would say, people have to make that inner decision, that inner choice, that they're going to change regardless if anybody else in their lives respond positively to that change, or whether they change themselves. So I think that's an important, and also do Jason's life circumstances as he's going through these tasks, do they change to make it easier for Jason to change? So, right?
No.
His friends don't change.
In fact, they leave.
Right. He loses his apartment for a while. So, in fact, his life circumstances around him get harder versus easier while he's initially going through change. And change can be like that sometimes. Sometimes, it's like when you clean out a room or a garage in your house or something. I've certainly had this experience that when I wanted to clean up a room, I actually have to make it messier before it gets organized and better. And I think transformation sometimes can look and feel like that. That
Absolutely.
You say, gosh, I made the courageous choice to change, and my life tanked initially as a result. And it doesn't always have to tank, but it would definitely be par for the course if you engage change of which we're speaking. And some relationships get harder in your life and things get more challenging for a time, because that's just showing you that you're leaving your old skills, you're leaving your old conditioned behaviors that used to make that relationship work or that experience work. And you have to call out the new skills that are either, you just haven't used in a long time, or you may not have ever used these types of skills. So, you're going from being a master of the conditioned self to a newbie at the authentic soul self. And when you're green and new at these new skills, you feel pretty raw and vulnerable. And that is a hallmark of somebody on this spiritual path on the way to wholeness. We have to be willing to get a little naked as we let go of our armor to find the new clothing or the new sense of self that we're forming and choosing in our life. So I just wanted to make that point, that other things in his life, right, didn't change in a way that made things easier for Jason. In fact, they either stayed the same or they got harder. And that sometimes is the path of the spiritual warrior coming back to wholeness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
And Lacy, maybe I wanted to just review the gifts, the themes of the gifts, that there's 12 themes, right, that end up emerging in this film. You have to look for some of them, because some of them are a little quieter, like Lacy was talking about the storage unit. There's just a lot of wonderful metaphors and teachings in this film if you take the time to watch it. But the ultimate, they give 12 gifts that Jason is given in this journey. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to name those.
Yeah, I will list them. They are the gift of work, the gift of money, the gift of friends, the gift of learning, the gift of problems, the gift of family, the gift of laughter, the gift of dreams, the gift of giving, the gift of gratitude, the gift of a day, and most importantly, the gift of love.
Yeah, they're really, really powerful. And of course, I love in this film that they don't necessarily flash up on the screen with subtitles, what the gifts he's getting while he's going through the challenges. And we don't necessarily get the gift of those kinds of subtitles in our life so that we know, while we work through this challenge, we're really being gifted this. What we often find is once we're through that challenge and we've stepped up, we look back in hindsight and we see what we were given.
Yes.
And so I think For myself, for sure, I can look back in the layers of things that I've been letting go in my life. And that's not to say that I don't have more layers that I'm still working on today. I don't think we're ever fully done evolving. But I think just for people who are maybe just beginning this journey and beginning to just have an awareness that maybe there's a better life or a more authentic life that they could be living, I want to say that there are these hidden gifts inside every task you're living or you're facing right now, and they're meant just for you. Right? These gifts were meant just for Jason and his journey. And some of those gifts are universal, but they show up in different types of tasks and challenges each one of us might face on the way back to love. Ultimately, to the gift of love, we're going to uncover all of these things, the gift of work, the gift of money, the gift of learning, the gift of giving, all those things. And so we can look for those things in our life too. So this is all of this conversation about the ultimate gift is to invite people into the awareness and that invitation, Lacy, and paying attention that we do have choice. And we can be summoned to choice in the form of whispers and little conversations like these, or we could be going through a significant challenge or an insurmountable problem in our life right now where we just can't see a way out. But those who are willing to say a way will be made and to step out in faith and trust in a way that Jason does, that I know myself, I know you, Lacy, have engaged that process on many levels. And so we're all in this journey of being invited to go back and recover our authentic, organic, innate, amazing selves that are here for a purpose and that we have unique gifts to share in the world.
Yeah, this may be something that some people may not understand, but I really have the feeling that it's why we incarnate on the planet is to do this work. And it's so important, this journey back to the authentic self. And if I just look at my own life and all of the struggle and challenges and egoic defenses that I've constructed out of my conditioned self and my conditioning as a child, and I've been on this journey for I'm going to date myself here, but I've been on this journey now for almost 52 years. And I look at my life as a perpetual journey, and I find joy in all of it, in the extreme hardships, as well as the amazing magical experiences that happen in my life and that we co-create sort of with the universe. So it's the entire life experience to me is this journey. And there's nothing more rewarding than having another piece of my armor fall off because I found my way to humility, or I found my way to vulnerability, or I faced something in myself that I just have not wanted to face. And it's very powerful. So I hope in the bottom of my heart that people listening will engage this awareness about their own journey, because it is incredibly rewarding to be open and to be awake to healing thyself, essentially.
That's beautiful. And I just all I wanted to add was that in many ways the ultimate gift is that incredible richness of love and a wealth of authenticity and passion and purpose and joy in our lives that really supersedes and almost transcends the desire for that monetary wealth or having things and stuff in our life that has really, over time and over many centuries, we've projected outward the wealth that we truly desire in the form of money and things. But really the best wealth that we have has always been inside us, and it's this wealth of connection and interconnectedness and oneness and giving and generosity. And while that may seem cheesy, it is actually what feeds the soul. It's the difference between somebody who can say they have joy in their life and meaning, or people who have a lot of stuff and a lot of things and a lot of financial wealth, but they struggle. They struggle to connect, and they struggle to have any kind of meaningful relationships in their lives. And so the invitation is there for all of us to experience all kinds of wealth, all of that joy, financial wealth, physical health and wealth, and interconnectedness. So We thank everybody for listening and tuning in today. If you want to see more of our podcasts and inspirational offerings, you can visit us on the web at www.wholesoulschool.foundation.org. We invite you to subscribe there because we do put out a monthly newsletter where we share at the beginning of each month what our themes will be, what the film that we're going to focus on will be, and any of our other offerings or special events we might be doing. So when you subscribe, you get to be in the know for what's going on at Whole Soul School and Foundation.
And I think it's important, obviously, if you're listening to this interview or this podcast now, you found your way to our YouTube channel, which is Whole Soul School and Foundation. And make sure you hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel. And that way, when these podcasts or video interviews are released, you will be notified of that.
Yes. And now, since you said that, I need to say one more thing. We are on Buzzsprout. You can look for us there at Whole Soul School and Foundation. But many of you might listen on other venues like Spotify, Apple iTunes, and Google Play Music. And so if you're a listener at any of those platforms, you can find our podcasts there. So we're definitely out on the web. We're easy to find. And we appreciate you tuning in to our conversations and growing and learning with us. And
I just want to say one more thing. I know we keep interrupting each other, but I do think it's important to remind listeners that this movie, The Ultimate Gift, there was much more to this movie and much more to talk about. But for the purposes of this month's theme of the ego and its clever defenses, we really wanted to focus on how this film helps illustrate what we're trying to talk about. But go check it out. It's a wonderful film.
Yeah, and I think you can find that, last I looked, if you were an Amazon Prime member, you could see that, you could stream it, and but you can also purchase it, and so you can Google that as well. It's definitely worth seeing.
Yeah.
And last thing is just to say that if you're paying attention, if you listen to our January's posts and our blogs and our podcasts, and you see our February's posts and blogs and podcasts, we're really inviting you to go on this journey with us. We're scratching the surface of some of these things. Some things maybe more than you've ever heard or thought about or talked about before. And for some of you, some of these concepts might be more familiar to you, but this is a refresher course to the other things we're going to be talking about in the coming months. But this is really, we've designed this to be at minimum a 12-month journey. So we're doing a different theme each month. And we've definitely gone deep into the ego these last 2 months, because that's a significant part of our conditioned selves, right? And we have to become aware of what we're trying to release before it can actually release.
Yes.
So we invite you to join us in March. We're going to have some new podcasts and a new theme coming up. And again, we just invite you to subscribe at the places we referenced. And so we hope you have a wonderful day. We send blessings to everyone.